Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, history enthusiasts of all ages, welcome back to another episode of Timeless Sagas. Today, we're going to delve into the thrilling story of the Mexican War of Independence, a tale of courage, revolution, and the birth of a nation. But first, let's set the stage. It's the early 19th century, and the Spanish Empire is starting to crumble. You might think the Spanish are at the top of their game, but oh, are they in for a surprise? Across the Atlantic, a storm is brewing in the land of Mexico, and it's not just the spicy food that's causing things to heat up. Our story begins in the year 1810, and the Mexican people are feeling the weight of Spanish oppression. Taxes are high, resources are scarce, and to top it all off, the Spanish have the audacity to enforce harsh restrictions on the Mexican people, keeping them out of positions of power. Talk about adding insult to injury. I mean, can you imagine being told you're not good enough to rule your own land? That's like your parents telling you that you can't even take care of your own room, and we all know how that feels. Now, you might be wondering, who's the hero of our story? Well, let me introduce you to a man named Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, a Catholic priest who believed that enough was enough. Father Hidalgo was no ordinary priest. He was an intellectual who was passionate about social justice and unafraid of taking matters into his own hands. He was basically the Batman of Mexican history, minus the cape and the cool gadgets, of course. On a fateful night in September 1810, Father Hidalgo, along with fellow revolutionary Ignacio Allende, made a daring move. They rallied the townspeople of Dolores and called for an uprising against Spanish rule, in what is now known as the Grito de Dolores or the Cry of Dolores. They didn't have social media back then, so instead of tweeting about it, Hidalgo rang the church bell, because that's how they did it back in the day. And so, the spark was lit, and the Mexican War of Independence began. People from all walks of life joined the cause, from poor farmers to wealthy landowners, united by a common goal, to free Mexico from Spanish rule. This ragtag army of rebels, armed with little more than pitchforks, machetes, and sheer determination, started winning battles against the well-trained Spanish forces. Talk about an underdog story. Now, you might think that Hidalgo's uprising would just be a flash in the pan, but oh no, this was just the beginning. While Hidalgo and Allende were leading the charge, other revolutionaries like José María Morelos and Vicente Guerrero were also fighting for Mexican independence all across the country. It was like a nationwide game of whack-a-mole, with the Spanish desperately trying to squash one rebellion, only for another to pop up somewhere else. But, as with any great story, there were setbacks and betrayals. In 1811, Hidalgo and Allende were captured and executed by the Spanish, a crushing blow to the revolution. But, did their deaths spell the end of the Mexican fight for freedom? Absolutely not. The people, inspired by their martyred heroes, continued to fight for independence, even as the conflict dragged on for over a decade. Meanwhile, back in Europe, Spain was dealing with its own problems, namely, the Napoleonic Wars. It turns out that trying to maintain a vast empire while fighting one of the greatest military minds in history is no easy task. Who would have thought, right? And so, Spain's attention was divided, giving the Mexican rebels a fighting chance. In 1820, a political crisis in Spain forced the Spanish King Ferdinand VII to accept a liberal constitution, which in turn led to unrest within Spain's powerful conservative factions. This weakened Spain's grip on its colonies even further, and the Mexican rebels saw a golden opportunity to strike. Enter Agustín de Iturbide, a royalist officer who, in a surprising twist, decided to switch sides and join the fight for Mexican independence. You know what they say, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. Iturbide joined forces with Vicente Guerrero, and together they crafted the Plan of Iguala, a document that outlined the terms for Mexican independence and the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. With this new alliance and a unified vision, the tide of the war began to turn. In 1821, after more than a decade of bloodshed, the Spanish finally recognized Mexico's independence, and the Mexican people were able to breathe a sigh of relief. Their long and arduous struggle had come to an end. But, as we all know, the story doesn't end there. The newly independent Mexico faced many challenges, from political infighting to border disputes with neighboring countries. Iturbide, the man who had once fought for the Spanish crown, briefly became Emperor of Mexico, only to be overthrown and executed a few years later. And so, the roller coaster of Mexican history continued. But that, my friends, is a story for another day. For now, let's celebrate the courage and determination of those who fought for Mexico's independence, and remember that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter future. So there you have it, folks, the Mexican War of Independence in all its glory. I hope you enjoyed this journey through time, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Sagas for more exciting historical adventures. Until next time, my fellow history buffs, keep exploring the past and discovering the timeless sagas that make our world so fascinating. Adios.